What's going on, everybody? I hope everybody's having an unbelievable week once again. It's Justin Jackson. Alabama comes into the Dean Dome and walks out with a 94-79 win against our Tar Heels. A game where both teams love to get up and down the floor and score the ball. Both teams come in averaging right around 90 points. Um, and, it wasn't necessarily supposed to be a game of defensive battle. Um, but you see the way the game started. North Carolina comes out, first possession on defense, forces a shot clock violation, gets the crowd going crazy, the whiteout in the Dean Dome. Uh, and then it just kind of changed from there on out. You had a team in Alabama that comes in struggling, shooting 32% from three. Um, you have a team in North Carolina who, for a while, I've been pushing, and a lot of people have been pushing that trio of guards. It's hard to really find another trio that's as good as them in Elliott and RJ and Seth in the way that they've been playing early on in this season. But you also had some questions. Who's going to step up inside? Who's going to stretch the floor and be, that spacer and the scorer from the outside of RJ? But that, for me, isn't the reason that North Carolina struggled with this Alabama team. Um, like I said, Alabama comes in struggling from the 3-point line, and they walk out of the Dean Dome knocking down 12 threes on 36%. North Carolina didn't necessarily struggle on the inside. North Carolina out-rebounded them 42-40 overall, out-rebounded them offensively. So what's the real issue? What's the concern of this team, and where does North Carolina go from here? I think for me, when I look at this game against Alabama, you can throw out the box scores, you can throw out guards struggling, you can throw out all of those X's and O's problems that we've kind of talked about throughout this season to start the season. I think when I watch this game, I think the biggest concern for me is seeing the lack of presence and the lack of fight and the lack of competitiveness that I saw kind of throughout that game. Um, I can think back to some of the bigger games that we had. I can think back to a Maryland game early on in my career at North Carolina where Marcus was returning and Maryland was coming in with a ton of hype. And those are the games where you don't leave anything in the tank. Those are the games where your emotions are so high. Those are the games where you've been just hyped for a couple days before to get out there and really play in those games. And that's what this kind of game against Alabama should have been. You have to give credit to Alabama and the fact that they're a really, really good team, coached by a really good coach and with some really good players. But that's not the real reason why I feel like North Carolina walked out of the Dean Dome last night with a 15-point loss. I think the most evident is the fight. I think I counted there was 3 or 4 times in the game where there was a dead ball or UNC had just scored to get some momentum back. Uh, and within 2 or 3 passes, Alabama was laying the ball up on the other end or had a wide open three with no contest and no defense around. And the only reason and the only legit, um, reason that you can say that that's happened is just the competitive spirit. There should never be a time in a game where guys are just getting wide open looks, and there should never be a time in a game where guys are getting fast break layups off of a dead ball. That should never be. That's a coach's nightmare. That's one that the coach will put you on the line in practice and run you until practice is over. So when I look at those situations, I completely lose sight of the other issues because I feel like that's the most prominent and that's the most important thing that has to be fixed for this North Carolina team going forward. And basketball doesn't stop. North Carolina goes into Georgia Tech on Saturday, 2 o'clock game, and Georgia Tech has been shown to bring the intensity at home at times and to really be an issue. Um, And so for me, where does North Carolina go from here? I think North Carolina first has to figure out, okay, who really wants to be out there and who really wants to compete and fight for a long run in the NCAA tournament and having a successful season in the ACC and the ACC tournament and trying to get a high seed in the NCAA tournament. I think that's the number one thing that that locker room and those players within that locker room has to ask each other. At this point, it's not coaching, it's not X's and O's, but who really wants to compete and who wants to fight and be that presence uh, moving forward.